That's right, Amanda. We are outside now. As you could see from inside the party headquarters, really sparsely attended, and the Liberals said they simply did not want us or our lovely esteemed panel guests to be in there. Probably didn't want to show off too much, that they didn't have too many supporters inside. But tonight we're going to be out on the lawn discussing things that really matter to the Liberal Party, like their very existence. And this evening I have the pleasure of being joined with Liberal strategist and insider Lisa Kinsella. Lisa, do you think that Kathleen Wynne will hold on to her seat?
Well, until I started seeing the returns coming in and the projections at this point, I don't know. It's looking much better for the Liberals than I think anyone imagined up until now. So it's early, obviously, but anyone who's made some predictions that the Liberals may not win any seats tonight, I think they're going to be wrong.
Well, and Smokey, so this is Smokey Thomas. He's the president of the Ontario Public Service Employees Union. Smokey, what do you think ultimately was what caused the demise of Wynne and the Liberals? Because we know that they're not going to be forming the government at the end of this evening.
Well, for me, I think when she hired Ed Clark as her advisor, that was the beginning of the end. Because he's a banker who tried to make like he understood what regular Ontarians need, and I think he set the stage for Doug Ford's populist movement.
And probably, well, with the sale of hydro, I know that was certainly a sore point. But another sore point with voters, especially here in Don Valley West, or in the Don Valley West riding, Wynne's own riding, was the introduction of the sex ed curriculum. And joining us this evening that will be speaking about this is Queenie. You're actually a candidate yourself running in Fort York Spadina.
Yes. So I'm watching for how poorly Wynne does in the ridings where there is a large immigrant population. It's not surprising that Wynne does poorly in the rural areas, but in 2014 she swept Toronto in the 905. But I think she has alienated the immigrants precisely because she forced her sex ed curriculum on them. And when you look at the photos of the protests in 2015, who protested? It was the Chinese, Sikhs, Muslims. And on Saturday, there was a protest in Thorncliffe Park precisely against the sex ed.
And I guess we'll see how big of a role this had to play in the election as we wait for the results to all come in. And we'll be back throughout the evening with analysis from our great group of panelists. Well, that's right, Amanda. They didn't want us and my esteemed panel guests to be inside, probably because they didn't want us to be showcasing the crying and, well, the sadness that eventually will be really hitting the floor there. Looks like right now that Wynne could be holding on to her seat. What does that mean for the party, Lisa?
Really going to have to wait and see is the total numbers. You know, we see right now that the Liberals are sitting at 8 seats, which means if they hang on to those 8 seats, they retain official party status, which is what the Liberals need to do to be able to hang in there and not become, you know, kind of this irrelevant third party that has to rebuild everything. So at this point, you know, it's not as dire as a lot of people were predicting, but we still have to wait and find out to see if Kathleen Wynne holds her own seat. From what I'm understanding, she's in quite the tight race.
And Smokey, what do you think in terms of the privatization of hydro? How big of a role do you think this had to play in the demise of the Liberals this evening?
Well, I think it played a huge role. My union actually funded the anti-Don't Sell Hydro movement with Rosario Marchese actually running it. So I think it's just the one thing that really was part of that tipping point. And it is just, and a lot of people really don't understand all the ins and outs of it all, but it just incents people. And you open your hydro bill. I have to admit, I work away all the time and open my wife showed me my hydro bill one day. Holy smokes. And I had a local business person show me his hydro bill, how much it's gone up in 5 years. So I think that played a big part in it. And 89% of Ontarians opposed the sale, and they did it anyway. So I think she just alienated the electorate right then and there.
And then Queenie, one of the things, if Wynne does hold on to her seat, does this really take the steam out of the Stop the Sex Ed curriculum agenda? Like, does it end the battle?
No. Okay, so we've had a big victory if Wynne does lose her seat. For one thing, she's destroyed Patrick Brown, who also supported her curriculum, is no longer there. And we have Doug Ford, who saw the need to state in his platform that he would do something about the sex ed. So that's a victory. But we're not sure if Doug Ford will actually keep his promise. So the sex ed party has to keep going on, and it's the responsibility of parents to continue fighting and putting pressure on the Ford government.
Because he didn't say how he would fix the sex ed curriculum, right? He just said he would fix it.
Exactly. He mentioned that he would restore the previous curriculum and consult parents and make sure that a new curriculum that was, agreeable to parents would be implemented. I hope he does it soon, and I hope that starting September, this new curriculum could be in place.
Lisa, do you think that this is going to be a long-lasting issue? Do you think that the sex ed curriculum controversy is something that is going to be following Ford, who seems to be looking towards being our next premier? Do you think it's something that's going to be following him along?
Well, to Queenie's point, he has said that he will tweak it. I mean, I'm a liberal. I support the sex ed curriculum as it stands now. Kathleen Wynne, she's the premier. She's a former minister of education. She did consult parents, about 4,000 of them. She also consulted experts like psychologists and psychiatrists and other people who would have a vested interest in this curriculum. And yes, I think people like Queenie and the people who support her and the party she's running for will absolutely keep this issue alive so that they can keep Ford's feet to the fire. And of course, there'll be people who are opposing their efforts who will also be wanting to make sure that Doug Ford becomes a progressive conservative premier as opposed to a extremely conservative premier.
Definitely an interesting night. We're going to be coming back throughout the evening discussing the results, seeing if Wynne actually does win her own seat and if the Liberals do hang on to party status. I don't know if it's greener out here, Amanda, but it is certainly colder out here, so we are shivering a little bit. I've had a blanket on me most of the night. But what we can say is that we know that Wynne is leading, but with only 8 seats that the Liberals are leading in or elected in, it means that she's going to have to stay on if they want to maintain their party status.
Absolutely. If we stay on 8 seats, if the Liberals take 8 seats tonight, and we know that Kathleen Wynne has won her seat, 8 seats is the magic number to retain official party status. So even if they get a couple of more seats or a few less seats, she can't resign tonight. So 8 seats, if she goes, that means they've lost official party status. So if we stay on 8, she has to stay on.
So, but what does that mean for the party? Should the party as a whole, should they be looking to Wynne to step down?
Well, I think what would have to happen in that scenario, if we have 8 seats and we need to hold those 8 seats, we would immediately, I would suspect, be thrown into a leadership contest. Hopefully she would stay on as an MPP in that scenario so that we would retain the party status that we need, which provides financing and allows the researchers and the assistants to be hired to help the party as they work in third-party status in the House. But it will be very interesting. If we stay on 8 seats, she has to stay on 2.
And from your perspective, Smokey, is that a good thing or a bad thing when it comes to the public service?
Wynne staying on? I think it's a good thing. I've known her for a long time. I like talking to her. She did get a little full of herself the last few years, but I agree with you, though. I don't belong to a party, but I don't see how she could quit tonight. You would lose party status, and so it'd be interesting to see how she conducts herself in the House, sitting on the other side of the House too. So just from that perspective, but she's a good debater. She's a good everything, right? Except, I never did. I wasn't a fan as premier, but so I'm with you. I don't belong to the party, but I don't see how she could quit tonight.
No, Queenie, Wynne is a mother. She's a grandmother. But I know that you guys don't necessarily see eye to eye when it comes to family policies. If she stays on, what type of impact do you think that'll have on the course of the legislature?
Well, I don't think she can have much of an impact, and I want her to understand the message that voters have sent to her tonight, that people hate her anti-family policies. And any politician who will support those policies will have a similar fate, just like Patrick Brown.
But in this case, she actually, it looks like she is going to win her seat. So is that really what the voters have said?
No, the voters haven't said that. And let's be clear, we're using very comfortable language and when we start talking about family policies. So I'm also a mother and a grandmother, and I'm a liberal and a progressive. So I quite like her family policies. I don't think this is a repudiation of everything that Kathleen Wynne has done as premier or as when she was a minister in the legislature. I think this is a culmination of things. Smokey can talk a lot about what's happened with hydro. I think people are having trouble with affordability. I think people are tired potentially of the Liberals. Change is good for democracy. It doesn't matter what party you belong to. But I don't think that we should just look at this in terms of the sex ed curriculum brought down the Liberal Party of Ontario, because that's not what's happened here.
Do you think then that perhaps she should have stepped down, or when should she have stepped down? And just very quickly, I'll ask you all very quickly, when should Wynne have stepped down?
She should have stepped down last year. The polls numbers were showing it, and if she had done it and got us a new leader, we might have had a different outcome tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll be back later in the show with more detailed analysis. Well, that's something that we were talking about with the panel, is who really is left to potentially fill the leadership seats. But first off, if the party is not able to hold on to party status, and we've seen this now, the Liberals with only 7 seats at this point, can Kathleen Wynne step down, and can she do so tonight?
Well, I think she'd step down, do the party a favor. It should be a huge distraction, so step down and let them rebuild, unless they need her to hang on to party status.
Well, so that's the thing, is that they may not, if they don't have party status, she may not even need to stay on as an MPP. So she could step down and open it right up again to a by-election for Don Valley West.
Which seemed to make sense to me. So
it does. And who are you thinking could fill her shoes because we do need to find it, or they do need to find a new Liberal leader. Who do you think is suited for this?
Well, if I was a Liberal, I'd be lobbying somebody like David Levac to run for leader, because he's always was in it for the right reason. He's a very honorable person. He's very measured. I always thought if it wasn't Andrew Horwath, he'd make a good premier.
And Queenie, do you have any suggestions on who the Liberals should look to, even on an interim basis?
No, but anybody would be better than Kathleen Wynne, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it looks like it's a lot busier out here in the parking lot. A lot of people are making the big exodus from the hall. So when I saw Amanda's, what she was seeing, looking at inside, well, we're having much more fun out here in the cold. Everybody's leaving.